the intro music. Yeah! Woohoo!
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In 2 videos in a row, you get Big Rev Deuce to start. And there's a reason. I wanted to show off my shirt. You can kind of see through it. There's holes in it. And today we're going to be talking about shooting holes in the PvP meta. And I know, it's a big word. It's a big acronym, actually. Because acronyms are letters that stand for words. All right, we're going to get Big Rev Deuce off here. Now, what I mean by meta, and if you're not familiar with that term, it's very popular in gaming. Meta simply stands for most effective tactics available. So when you're looking for a meta, you're simply going into, okay, what's the best thing that works and what is something that's the go-to for a lot of players? And today we're going to be talking about countering the current PvP meta, which is built around critical builds. Now, keep in mind, I talk about this all the time. This game simply is too complicated to just run generic stuff. So what I say in this video might not cover everything. And I'll also go ahead and tell you that this will cover mostly players in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Not everybody in the 20s has some of these, but it is good to go ahead and learn these crews and find out what's going to be effective for you long term. So we're going to talk about countering some of that and countering criticals. And the center around counting criticals really goes to one officer, and that's Honorguard Worf. Now you can count Khan in this, and I do have Khan part of one of the antis that we'll be talking about here in today's video, but the main one that you're going to be working on is against Honorguard Worf. So for example, here is a pretty common modern base rating crew, or we could say this is the base rating meta. So Rom is obviously going to, delay the first round of everybody's combat when attacking a base. Harrison gives you shield bypass to put more damage down to the hull, and then obviously we're running criticals to get that critical bonus. If you're not familiar with how criticals work, we've covered that in several videos, but essentially a basic critical is going to do this right here. Depending on your research and different effects that you have on your ship, give you a bonus based on this ranking. So for me, 210% basically means I'm multiplying my damage by a factor of 2. So that is the meta. But how do you counter this? And more importantly, how do you counter the critical aspect of it? We've talked about countering ROM. Countering ROM is pretty simple. Crass counters ROM. But when you are going into a PvP fight, you want to be able to go and say, hey, how do I stop these criticals from destroying me? And because it's so common, what does that look like? Well, I'm glad that you asked. And because you asked, you get a screenshot. Hey, right up there. We've got a 6 million Enterprise destroying a 16.3 million power Pilum. Now, or as it should be properly pronounced, Pilum. Now, this is not something that I can say, hey, you're going to get this kill every time. But there's a reason that the left worked. A max Enterprise able to take down a pretty, I'd say a pretty strong Pilum here, running not a bad crew. And that's the key. Now, was this Pilum loaded out to destroy Enterprises? No. And we're not going to pretend like it was. But this is not like one of those bad crew videos where Rev's like, well, somebody just doesn't know how to crew their 46 rare. No, this is actually a decent crew. Kang is for fighting other interceptors, and then they're running a critical hull breach build, which is the meta. That is what everybody's doing a lot of now. Now, sure, you mix mitigation, and this is a mixed build. You've got critical hull breach and piercing values all in that Pilum ship, but most people are going to look at this and go, well, no way does the Enterprise win. And let me talk about ways that you can win and why loadouts like this and behind your screen loadouts like this can help you counter Honorguard Worf. So let's take this off the screen real quick. We'll come back to it. Go away. Let's go to officers real quick and let's look at Honorguard Worf at what we're trying to do here. So if we sort by group, go all the way basically to the bottom now, Honorguard Worf being a newer officer, he's going to be right here. Officer ability, the Rage of Kittimer. For the first 8 rounds of battle against players, Honorguard Worf increases the critical hit chance by 45% at tier 1. So basically what this is doing is almost giving a guarantee that you're going to land a lot of criticals. That increases the damage by a lot. Without hull breach, you're usually getting at least a factor of 2 increase in damage. You add hull breach on top of that, which is another 1.5 multiplier, you're starting to see huge damage hit where normally you simply cannot even mitigate enough of it because you're hitting so hard. How do we lessen that blow? So to do that, there's 3 different officers that can directly affect that. There's other ways that you can do it, but there's 3 ones that we're going to talk about primarily today. So let's hop out of Honorguard Worf. So we're going to sort by group and let's go from the top down. So if you kind of scroll, you're going to have access to honestly critical builds earlier than you're probably going to have access to the anti-critical builds. But let's go ahead and find us a Suru card. And that's probably going to shock a lot of people to hear Suru. But Suru is actually a card that can be used to counter the meta, which is critical builds. The reason being precautions. When fighting players, every time your ship is hit by a critical hit, Suru decreases the critical hit chance by 10%. Now the negative with Suru, obviously, and if we would be running no synergy, just looking at this part, no synergy, you got to get hit first. So you're going to take some, beating up front. Now for higher tier ships that have a lot of hull health, tier 9s, tier 10s, tier 7s, tier 12s, you've got enough to take a little bit of a barrage early and then completely take away their ability to land criticals. And that's what Suru will do. You'll typically find Suru used more with higher level players than lower levels because of some of the issues that I just talked about. You don't have enough hull health to kind of make it through consistently. So Suru is really only going to work if you've got a higher tier ship. But let's take a look at another option. The other option is focusing on the PvP crew, which is kind of, ironic, because when I think PvP in Star Trek, the original series is not what I normally think, but the original series is one of the strongest PvP crews in the game. The first officer is TOS Uhura, which you saw me load out earlier. Now, her captain's ability is sorry, neither when fighting players as long as the ship has morale. Now, I've got TOS Kirk on here, but look, decreases the opponent's critical hit chance by 110%. So simply takes away criticals altogether. This is a fantastic counter and will help you win. In fact, I won recently running this build, fighting off a critical. So if we go into my logs, I'll have to go back and scroll because so many, we got to go through so many of these different things. But if you look at this victory I had against a cloaked enemy, this is an Enterprise coming at me with a critical focus build against mine anti-critical build. Now, obviously I'm a stronger Enterprise. I did still lose about 40% of my health, but you saw I very easily took down the opponent because of the crew that I was running. I was still able to maintain criticals. They were not, thanks to TOS Uhura. You didn't really see them put forth much damage. And then of course, because they didn't run a morale setup, they ended up losing. You see, if you just go through shots here, they have no criticals getting laid down. And then I start actually laying down criticals. That's the power of TOS Uhura. Those are the first two options. And that's one of the reasons that if you look on my Intrepid right now, that's why I had this. This is that same loadout that you just saw. Now, this is something that I would usually run on an Enterprise. My Enterprise is simply running a hostile crew right now, but for the purposes of this video, it works. But there's another way, and there's another officer. Now, the reason I'm saving this officer for last is because honestly, this one might be the best, but also the hardest to use and to get to, because the effectiveness of this officer really depends on you leveling them up. Now, you can level this officer up two different ways, or procure this officer two different ways. And the officer that I'm referring to is TOS Spock. Yes, if you were shocked by the fact that it's TOS Spock, comment down below. Let me know why you're shocked. We did make a video about him about a year ago when he first came out to explain how he works and why he's good. But think of this as a refresher for those who didn't catch that video or don't remember. His officer ability is called Prosper. When fighting players, as long as the ship has morale, TOS Spock decreases the critical hit damage bonus of the ship by 50%. Now at tier 1, that's not a lot. However, once you start to tier him up, he can max out at 150%. And what you can end up finding is that that damage will go down so much that you're actually doing less damage when you hit a critical. So he is basically the PvP version of Gala. If you remember Gala, we can scroll up in the screen real quick, come up to the top. This is an officer we talk about in Armadas quite a bit because of critical avoidance. If the opponent is a hostile, decreases the damage from his critical hits by 50%. And we'll use this to when a Armada hits a critical, what do they end up doing? Delivering 0 damage or very little, because if we negate the critical damage, it doesn't stop the critical hit from happening. It simply removes the damage that's created from it. So if you put basically a negative bonus in, if we get below 1, then that multiplier creates less damage than more. So criticals can actually hurt a player, and that makes TOS Spock really good. So let's take a look at some examples of that thanks to Spock's Club. Shout out to JB for helping with some of these logs and putting some of this together. So if you look at the very top here, here's 3 different crews, and you see the logs are listed based on it. So an Enterprise with Honorguard Worf, an Enterprise with TOS Spock, and then an Enterprise with Marcus. And what you see is, look at the hull damage in the middle. TOS Spock taking 11.4% in the same battle, the same rerun, taking over 11% less damage to the hull. Now, what's crazy is that's a longer fight. It's more rounds. However, look at the criticals at the bottom. Still receiving 66% criticals. So the criticals are still hitting the ship, but the amount of damage actually reaching the hull is less than any of the other metered examples. And that's kind of what you saw in the first screenshot that I shared. So let me rotate that on back. That's how the Pylum lost to an Enterprise. Yeah, research is important here. It's a max Enterprise, all that other stuff. But that Enterprise did not come loaded out for damage. It came loaded out to stop you and mitigate you. TOS Spock there, mitigating the amount of damage created by criticals, lowering it to the point where that Pylum is actually doing less damage when it's hitting criticals. And then we've got the bonus of Zao raising our mitigation up. So we're taking less damage, you're dealing less damage, and that's how you get an Enterprise actually beating a 4-star rare. Now, if only we could get these things to happen against 5-star ships, because there's simply no way to really realistically do that in PvP. Thank you, Scopely. Yeah, I'll talk about that problem in a later video, but it really is just getting more and more obvious how that needs to get adjusted. So I'm really curious to see if you like this video, talking about combating the meta. How can you use and fight off PvP crews? This gives you an option. TOS Uhura, TOS Spock, and Suru are 3 officers, and they're not the only ways to go about countering metas, but they're 3 officers that can help you combat criticals and how dangerous they can be in PvP and simply make them not as dangerous anymore. Now, I did talk about 2 ways to get TOS Spock. I want to mention that real quick for those who are unfamiliar. He is an away team mission. I do realize that away team missions are based on RNG. You don't know when it's going to pull up. My current away team mission for an officer is Borg Triple, which I'm excited about, but that obviously doesn't help when it comes to TOS Spock. Now, TOS Spock is in the Transporter Pattern store. For newer players here, you get Transporter Patterns once you have maxed rare and epic officers. So you can use the Transporter Pattern store to start procuring TOS Spock, but I do have to really point out that the most effective version of TOS Spock is going to be when he's leveled up. Tier 1, you're not going to see a lot of use, but you will see a lot as you tier him up. So if you're looking for crews long term, right now, the meta, the most effective thing that you can kind of do in PvP is run critical builds. So the most effective tactic available to counter it, take away that power. Woo! Lots of information, and tried to stay away from as much math as possible. And as we wrap up, I'll throw up the example here, because seeing the actual percentages on the screen is what really shapes it up. And you know, you can look at the battle log, but seeing 11.4, and obviously that's not going to be the same for every player. Each battle is unique, but you can see it in operation there. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, live long and prosper. Stay safe for the Space Cowboys. Deuces, that's me. I'll catch you on the next Star Trek Fleet Command video, and honestly, just about any Star Trek video that we do. Do encourage you to join the Discord if you haven't already. Link is in the description of this video, and smash the like button, as that does help the channel. And yeah, appreciate you. If you got any questions, if you want to know more about the content, drop a comment down below. It's not hard. There's literally a box that'll pop up in 3, 2, 1. Right there. There's the box. Do it now. We'll see you later. Long videos, but cool video. I liked it. I'm not biased at all.
An even better outro than the intro. For the Empire and glory to your house.